So, first of all, Marina, I just want to have your responses to the play. And I note that the cover of your book really picks up our set. Can you see this sort of purpley colour? So we're in tune there. Tell me a little bit, were there echoes for you in what you saw?
Very much so, very much so. And I love the idea that of treating insomnia as a really rich experience and with really kind of complex reasons. And I mean, for me, it's so much, it's a state of suffering, and it's a state of existential suffering, really. You're out of time, you're alone. I do think if it, you know, there is also, I think, and I touch on this in my book, because you're alone, and because it's so, your mind is racing, and it's a very strange state of being, that there's a kind of grandiosity to insomnia too. So you see your life in very kind of dramatic terms, I think. So yes, I mean, in many ways, I found the play really affecting, and I liked its treatment of insomnia as a kind of a really integral kind of part of our human life, part of the way that we process our experiences.
So that's good to hear, because in fact we were watching characters in later life, and that's what my company specialises, focusing on telling stories about later life when it does hit, because it certainly has hit me, which was why we really the inspiration to start the play. And so I'm glad to hear that the richness of that, and your wonderful book, I have to say. It ranges very wide, because it's not just a personal account of the torments and surprisingly the gifts of insomnia you've discovered, which is in itself quite fascinating, but you take us to so many places in your book. So myths and folklore, literature, ancient and modern. You take us from Gilgamesh in the 2nd millennium BC, you know, the first insomniac in literature perhaps, and to Scheherazade, to Sleeping Beauty, The Princess and the Pea, to the meanings of darkness as a source of wisdom in some cultures, and also darkness as a metaphor for not wanting to see the horrors of humanity, that gave us sugar, tobacco, and coffee, all stimulants.
Slavery.
Yes, all stimulants to keep the oppressed, industrialized workforce alive during the 12-hour shifts, but that kept black people as slaves in perpetual darkness. So that's the sort of range that comes up in this book, which I think is amazing. And I love this book, or as the character Hugo said, I love this book. Because it took me to so many surprising places, including insights not just into your own rather provocative responses to insomnia, but also insights in what it's like to have a bed partner who sleeps, you know, when you can't sleep, and privileging us to glimpses of your relationship with this bed partner that you call ZZZ, and of love. And these are among the many meanderings of your book. So I'll say no more, Marina, because you will express it so much better, as you do very eloquently in this wonderful book. It's very lyrical, and it's rightly been called a roaming collection of collages, a roaming collage of reflections and observations, poetic to the core. Or you've been called the Scheherazade of sleeplessness, which is rather lovely. So I read a couple of extracts from your book to the cast, because I wanted, you expressed so well the actual experience of insomnia, you evoke it. So I wonder if you could read these for us now.
So Sonja's asked me to read a few bits from the beginning of the book, where it's kind of the setup, if you like, to take you into a slightly different world, which is this world of darkness. The book moves from a kind of innovation into this sort of more, wide-ranging, roving, much as the characters in this play did. You know, they go everywhere. You go everywhere at night, to a kind of a epiphany type of exaltation towards the end. So it moves through phases, and I tried to get those phases to feel, as you read it, quite hypnotic. I wanted it to feel like a sort of hypnotic lullaby, lulling you to sleep kind of book, even though its content is quite innovative most of the time. Anyway, this is from the beginning. When I'm up at night, the world takes on a different hue. It's quieter and closer, and there are textures of the dark that I've begun paying attention to. I register the thickening, sense-dulling darkness that hangs velvety as a pall over deep night, and the green-black tincture you get when moisture charges the atmosphere with static. At the velvet end of my insomniac life, I'm a heavy-footed ghost moving from one room to another, weary, leaden, there, but also not there. I read for an hour, make myself a cup of tea, and sit with the dog. On nights like these, I leave a trail of evidence behind me to be discovered and remembered in the morning. My reading glasses upturned on the coffee table, carelessly cast off like a pair of party shoes. An open book face down on the chair, food crumbs on the kitchen counter. Sapped by fatigue, I stand in the middle of the living room in the dusty light and pull my dressing gown around. I'm trying to puzzle out the clues so as to reconstruct the events of the night before, but I keep blanking. The mise en scène of morning starts to resemble the scene of a crime. All that is lacking is the body shape outlined on the floor. The missing body, wakeful when it should be sleeping. Is there one more bit?
A little bit.
Oops, I'm so sorry. I can't read my own writing. It's boring. Oh yeah, here we are. Sorry. There are also luminous moonlit nights, lurid nights, when everything feels heightened and I jerk awake with a fidgety awareness, my mind speeding. In the grip of an enervating mania, I creak my way down the stairs and switch on the computer, scrolling for bad news from places where daylight reigns. An exploding bomb, the wreck of human carnage, floods, fires, terrorist traps, ordinary disasters. I pace and fret, railing at the dumb news, racing with emotion. I feel held back by the night because I'm convinced that the hidden mystery of our beautiful existence might be found in its very bowels. I'm looking for insight, for a nugget of value to carry across night's border into morning.
Thank you very much. What was so interesting for me, who also cannot sleep, is, and though in fact I was told by a doctor that I don't have insomnia, because even though I have broken nights, maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night in total, I do function totally normally in the day. I'm not sluggish. I'm even quite perky when I wake up. I'm not tired. So he said, you don't have insomnia, you're a short sleeper. So I don't have insomnia, apparently. But you know, what really struck me was the fact that I'm in fact in many ways the mirror opposite with my own sort of sleep disorder, if you like, because I never get up. I mean, I can't bear to leave the coziness of the bed. And you roam by night, and then you reflect on the day during the night. And I'm thinking of Dickens, you know, he had huge insomnia, so he roamed the streets and he observed the poor, and he talked to them, and eventually he helped a lot of them, and that fed back into his work. But I think you notice, you made a point yourself, you don't leave the house because you wonder, if you were a man, would you go and walk the streets like Dickens did? You in fact stay within your home, but you roam. So is that right?
Yes.
You get up?
Yes, I do. And I've often thought, you know, it's at night when I feel envious of, you know, being, you know, not being a man really, because I think I would roam, I would go outside, but I don't think it would be very safe.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I move from room to room.
Yes, you do, and you describe it. In the morning you find the sort of the trails. So one thing you say in the book that sleep is the opposite of a lack. So you talk about sleep being regarded as a lack, and yet for you this description seems at odds with your own experience. Can you say a little bit about that?
I think I might, maybe do I say insomnia as a lack, or defined as a lack?
Sleep,
usually?
yes, exactly,
and
yes.
because it's defined as the lack of sleep.
Exactly, yes.
But I find that it's very much the opposite. So in insomnia, you are intensely present, as all your characters were. You are intensely present to yourself. You can't switch your mind off. You're intensely present to, you know, apparitions, phantoms, atmospheres, noise. All those things are amplified at night because you're keenly awake and everything else is very quiet. So there are a lot of flips in the book. You know, I'm very interested in the idea of insomnia being a border crossing, because you're awake when you should be sleeping. So it's a trespass. And so what happens in this state of trespass, this intense presence? And if you flip that around then, so sleep then becomes the lack, because you're not there, are you? You know, the person is gone. And that's where zzz comes into it, because there's this lump in the bed who's entirely absent. Yes, I envy the fact that he's asleep, but he's not there, you know, he's just a blank, whereas I'm present. Not in a good way, but yes. So there are lots of flips that I play with in the book, and that intrigue me about the state of insomnia, because I think it tells us something interesting about the way our minds work.
Yeah. No, I really like that, and I love the way that you did include your personal relationship and the role of the bed partner in your life, in the life of the insomniac. And you said, I think you said, to share a bed with someone is to entertain a conversation played out in the language of movement and space. I really like that. And then you said, every now and then I steal a look at Z's sleeping form, melding into the blackness of the night, blended into virtual immateriality, and I long to buy a ticket to sail over to his continent. So that's very nicely expressed. So you also talk about the loneliness of insomnia. You say insomnia makes an island of loneliness. Do you want to say any more about that?
Yes, I mean, I think, again, I found so many echoes of it in your play today. I mean, it's that existential loneliness, you know, you can't stop. You don't have that much conscious control, I think, in insomnia, because it's the insistent nagging thoughts of the unconscious that kind of burst through to the fore. So whatever deep thing is bothering you bursts through. And, you know, you are utterly alone with your reflections, your regrets, your guilt, your hopes, your failed dreams, your innovations, whatever it is that happens to be bothering you. It's intensely lonely. And I drew on a poem, I think, by Charles Sinnett, which is a very kind of humorous poem about the kind of insomniacs conference, and nobody's there. And there's supposed to be this fabulous speaker who's going to come and speak and address the group, and of course the bright lights are there, but there's not a soul. I think it's called the Congress of Insomniacs, which is, it's kind of darkly amusing, but then so much about insomnia is dark.
Well, I was thinking that there's another lovely poem that I was going to use as part of a play, if it had been another play, and it's called The Sleepless Ones. And it's a fantasy of all the people who could not sleep at night came out and went into the parks. And it's just a brilliant image of all these people congregating and sharing, you know, because they're so alone otherwise. When we were preparing for this show, we did a lot of workshops over a number of years before the pandemic. We had the show ready, the pandemic happened. 2 years later, we produced the show. But what we did in these workshops, we invited actors to come. And we asked them to come with a character that could not sleep, and then to improvise. But we also wanted the reason why they couldn't, the trigger. What was the trigger? What was keeping them up at night? And you muse a little bit on what might have started your insomnia, and you go back to childhood, don't you? Remember? Can you tell that story a little bit?
Yes, I mean, I think, you know, I think I was never a good sleeper. I was always up at night, and it was a kind of a time when I suppose, you know, lots of children don't want to be put to bed, and I thought that I was worried about never waking up. I didn't know where you went when you slept, so I just wanted to be there. I do think there's something constitutional about about insomnia. I think that there are disturbances in people's circadian rhythms, people who are subject to it, and I think that midlife plays havoc with those rhythms.
As does later life.
As does later life,
Exactly.
and your sleep patterns.
And also, did you feel it was in your family at all?
Not especially.
No,
I don't.
no.
I think I'm the only non-sleeper.
No, I knew you had a nice sort of metaphor for sleepwalking. I remember, because you mentioned about the difference between your parents.
Yes, I think the temperamental difference that I felt that, you know, that my father kind of sleepwalked through life because he was somebody who didn't see things. So that's a kind of sleepwalking. And that it then led me to think maybe, you know, this was the point at which I could start flipping insomnia really, because although I longed for sleep, you know, I didn't want to spend my life sleeping. I didn't want to be asleep in life, and so I became alert to perhaps I started thinking more about the value of being awake, what it meant to be awake, what it meant to be present. So I started playing with those themes a bit. I looked at the fantasies that we have around sleeping. I think you mentioned about, I wanted to look at enchanted sleep. You know, why is it so many fairy tales put people to sleep? What is it, what's so enchanting, what's so wonderful about this enchanted sleep? But actually then flip that again, because in enchanted sleep you don't dream. So you might as well be, you know, Michael Jackson taking Propofol. You know, you're so not there. It's not a human condition, enchanted sleep. It's a fairy tale or a magical condition. It's not in a human condition. Your mind is alive at night. You know, it's full of dreams. It's full of thoughts. And in insomnia, it's almost like when consciousness breaks through that unconscious process. That's why all the thoughts come flooding back. It's going on already. You know, your mind's very active at night.
Absolutely. You do mention remedies a little bit. You know, the various remedies that we've all tried, and which have all failed, generally speaking, and including sleep restriction, which I tried, and it was pretty awful. You know, one of the remedies that they recommend for cognitive behavioral disorder is that you reduce the hours you spend in bed to the hours you calculate you are sleeping, which might be you reckon you're only sleeping 5 hours at night. So then, because they don't want you to associate bed, they only want you to associate the bedroom, they say, with sex and sleep. So they only want you to be in bed for those 5 hours. So you stay up till midnight and you wake and you're woken up at 5, and you do that for a number of weeks. And it worked for a little bit for me, it didn't work for you at all. But you're already not feeling very good because you're not sleeping. You are so exhausted by that time. It does work for some people, apparently. Did you try other things? And also you did mention the one sleep doctor who had a rather different approach, and Ruben Nyman.
Yeah.
That was interesting, I thought.
Yeah, he is very interesting. I've actually subsequently done radio programs with him, and he's got fascinating ideas about, he doesn't think that there is a dualism or a polarity between sleep and wakefulness. He said the brain is much more complex than that. And there are bits of the brain that are asleep, and there are bits of the brain that are awake all the time. And he actually said that he thinks wakefulness is the default position of consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah, so, or, you know, did he say sleep? Well, one of them, it's the opposite. It's the one you don't think. So when you walk through the day, actually, mostly you're asleep, was his view. But I mean, he has a very poetic, mythic idea of sleep, and he thinks that medication has just completely misunderstands insomnia because it treats it as a kind of problem in search of a cure, and as a somatic problem, whereas actually it's a state of anxiety and anguish, and yearning, and it's much more complex, as the characters in the play have shown.
Oh, it's a pretty unusual sleep doctor.
Somebody with his hand up.
Yeah, someone was telling me the other day that Jung apparently had this metaphor that we're dreaming all the time. Jung,
yes.
Carl Jung said that we're dreaming all the time. It's just that as we sleep, we're much more present with it, but that's going on at another level for all of our waking time.
I like that.
One thing you did masses of research, and that's why it became so, I mean, once you got the idea for the book, it was quite fun, I suppose, to explore sleep in so many different ways. And you went to see this Burne-Jones painting, which I hadn't heard of, called Little Briar Rose, which I think is Sleeping Beauty, probably. And can you tell us about that a little bit? You know, the school of painting. And in that painting, what you saw was the idealization of sleep. We have this ideal of sleep as repose. Can you tell me a little bit about that when you went to see the painting?
Yeah, so I went to see it first of all in situ. So it's in a manor house in Oxfordshire that belonged to Lord Farringdon, and it's kind of open on and off. It's in the middle of nowhere, so you need a car, and I don't drive, blah, 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 but I did get there. And it was in quite a dark room, actually. And Burne-Jones,
pre-Raphaelite, isn't it?
It's pre-Raphaelite, and there are 4 monumental paintings. They're huge. They're like these huge landscape on the wall. And he wanted it to be seen in semi-darkness, so that you actually have to stand in front of them and work hard, as though you're looking through the gloaming, you know, so that your eyes slowly discern the images. Then I saw them at the Tate, because there was a Burne-Jones retrospective at Tate Britain, in better lighting. They're far more magnificent in good lighting. I mean, they pop out, beautiful paintings. And Burne-Jones was obsessed with this theme, and he spent 40 years, he kept returning to them. He did sketches, he did drawings, he made mosaic tiles, all of the theme of the Briar Rose, and then they culminated in these monumental paintings. But it's quite interesting because, again, the messages, on the surface, the message is an idealization of sleep. But actually, there's quite a revolutionary kind of message in the paintings, which is that there are chinks of light here and there, where, you know, wakefulness is bursting through, and you have the sense that actually the canvas, he's telling you this is a painting, really, because there's light behind the canvas, and there's another world behind the canvas. So behind this enchanted sleep, which is a dead world, there's life and light, you know, and actually this kind of mirrored his politics, because people thought, oh, he's such a kind of, you know, boring painter of the old school, you know, he does venerable works of art, he's interested in mythic figures, but actually, you know, he wanted to create a kind of a revolution in art. He wanted, and very politically, you know, wanted people to be awake to kind of politics and injustices, and, you know, he wasn't at all this kind of romantic figure that we treat him to be today, and he was very much in cahoots with William Morris, who wrote the very wakeful, I don't know what to call them, epithets under each painting, each of the 4 paintings, all about kind of, you know, stirring yourself up. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Very interesting.
But I think what you saw in the sleeping figures of women, you know, sort of decoratively lying, was repose. So it gives the message of women sleeping in repose, beautiful postures. And that leads me on to the idea of the whole issue of putting women to sleep. You know, Virginia Woolf, I would think, we're thinking of her and her husband making sure, because she had what we would call mental health problems today, that she should not work beyond a certain, only work for 4 hours a day, then she had to take to her bed. And that takes us to all sorts of cures for the so-called hysteric woman,
Yeah.
and how to deal with. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So yes, I was very interested then. It came out of looking at women in paintings, because I hadn't considered before, when I started with the Burne-Jones, and then I started looking at other books about women, and there were so many sleeping women symbolizing whatever in paintings, you know, one thing or another, but they're asleep. And it seemed to me to be a really rich metaphor, especially at that time when laudanum was very common treatment for women who couldn't sleep for sleep problems, so that, you know, the idea was that if a woman was problematic, you just put her to sleep. And it was around the time of the rest cure as well, which Virginia
Yes,
Woolf
the
did,
Rest Cure.
and Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and all these kind of, you know, incredibly creative, active women who were frustrated by the roles of, you know, motherhood and not being able to work, and the restrictions of Victorian society. and the rest cure was this idea that, well, they should just be put to sleep, so we didn't have to really listen to them and hear their problems.
Yeah, that was another very interesting thing I picked up in your book. And what I think is what really comes through in the book, and was your journey possibly in your introspections about your own insomnia, is what it does for creativity. I mean, it doesn't do much for me because I'm trying not to get up, and I'm not trying to sort of block it, but you are roaming through the night, and it's giving you some sort of stimulation at some level. Can you tell us a little bit about your sleep history, in a way that the torment of not sleeping really evolved into a sort of creative endeavor in the writing of this book, which was, again, turning it around?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very difficult, really, isn't it, when you can't shut your brain down? And I find that the earworm songs and the nonsense that goes around my head is the most frustrating part of it. So I've tried to harness that a little bit and work with the other kind of insomnia, which is the free association. And I do think, I mean, free association is creative, there's no doubt about it. So I thought maybe I could kind of flex that a bit and bend it a little bit to my purposes, you know, use the free association as creative time. And I tried to do that. I wrote some of this book in the middle of the night. Some of the new book, I've also worked on the middle of the night, or the very early hours of the morning, where I find, you know, I'm the editor, the censor, the kind of conscious brain is less punitive, and I can do more creative, free associating thinking. And if that can find my way into its books, then I'm harnessing something productive out of the suffering.
Well, that's quite inspiring. I think maybe I should get up. Right. So really, you, in a way, you come to terms with it, even valued it. I mean, you say at the end, what would I be without my insomnia? You know, is that?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I've just had 2 weeks of such bad sleep. I'm finding it really hard to say because I'm so tired. I mean, it's that kind of tired where you can't. You're standing in front of a ticket machine in a tube station and you don't know how to use the ticket. It's that kind of thing, you know.
Yes.
But I do think I take something from the insomnia. And I do think that it defines me to a degree. You know, there's like any long-term problem that we have. You know, and I think it's better to treat it that way than to treat it as something you can cure with a pill. I think it's just much healthier.
Yes.
Accommodation. We've come to an accommodation.
And then one of the things that I wonder about is the association of sleep with death. And what you mentioned about, as a child, wondering where you go when you sleep and can you come back? That seems so basic.
Yeah, I think Hesiod called death the golden sleep. There's a very close association, isn't there, between sleep and death. Death, sleep being a kind of prefiguring or a mini death, or and death being also seen as a long sleep. Yeah.
I haven't read your book, but do you have any idea why you go to sleep? Is there a pattern as well?
I think it's really complex, actually. I think it's really complex, and that's why I think there's this whole kind of, psychological mythopoeic dimension to sleeplessness. And I see it as really intrinsic to the human condition. So I don't think there's one reason. I think that it's kind of, I think also, this is what I wanted to say when I was sitting in the chair watching the play, I think we really live in an age of anxiety, actually. I think we need I'm with Freud here, modernity makes us sick, or post-modernity makes us sick. We lead really complex, difficult lives that really preclude rest. We don't rest much. And I mean mental rest, and I mean psychic rest, I mean actual rest, any kind of rest. It's not something that's very valued in our kind of busy urban lives. And I think it's making us sick, really. I think it causes anxiety, I think it causes insomnia, I think it causes depression. I think it makes people kind of fragment and fracture and find it very difficult to pay attention to things.
Our current cycles of sleep are different to how we've evolved.
Yeah.
We evolved to be awake at night because it was the way that we survived. And we snatched moments of rest, mostly during the day, when it was when it was hot. So we're now programming our brains to a cycle of sleep, which is actually not evolutionary.
Well, it was capitalism, really, this idea that that you sleep at night so that you're ready to do the working day.
Yeah.
So just go to bed now because we need you to be productive during the day. But I was looking at the early modern period where they had the two sleeps.
The second
so
sleep.
the second sleep. So you were up at night doing your letters, and if you were Samuel Pepys, getting your hair cut or drinking a glass of port with a friend, and and then they'd go back to sleep. I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning. And have a little sleep before getting up. But yes, I mean that's right. We've corralled a very kind of strange pattern of sleep, and it doesn't suit our rhythms necessarily, or biology, or it's a good point.
So why did Samuel Pepys do that? What's the?
So everybody did it then. I mean, it was very typical of the way people slept, because of course there wasn't electricity at night, and there wasn't capitalism either, making everyone at work go to work. So so you go to sleep sort of
when it's dark.
When it's dark. Go to sleep early, wake up in the middle of the night, do some stuff, go back to sleep.
But I mean, the waking up in the middle of the night then is to do with maybe not sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was constitutional. I think
Yeah.
people woke up in the middle of the night, but they didn't fret about it. They didn't think, oh my God, I'm insomniac and I have to be in work in 5 hours' time.
Yeah.
They just knew they could go to sleep again, so they used that time.
But they might have had their fill of 6 hours by then, so it's natural to wake up.
Yeah.
When sort of, and then do a few things. If they're agricultural, they might go and see to their animals and then go back again.
And in relation to that, actually, we fetishize sleep as well. So
Yes,
we made a fetish of the bedroom. So the bedroom is a fairly modern invention.
Absolutely.
Again, in early modern era, people slept in hallways, in inns, for example. They were made to share rooms with total strangers. It was perfectly normal.
Mm.
The idea of a private space that you sleep in, that you must sleep in, is very modern.
And that's also the loneliness, because of course a lot of people would share a bed, families would share beds, wouldn't they? So it sort of takes the edge off that loneliness.
Yeah.
You weren't necessarily isolated
Yeah.
in your own space.
And I think there's something about people finding it easier to sleep with someone in their bed.
Yes,
That human
it's comforting.
warmth. It's one reason why I wanted to put a sleep partner in,
Yes.
because it felt more real that way.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else?
I think there's a lot though as well, isn't there, about, we read a lot about, you've got to have this many hours sleep.
Yes.
You to be productive, and this
Yeah.
is the best thing for you, or you're going to be like suffering from this or this or this, and you think, oh dear, that's all ahead of me then, because I can't sleep very well, so it's clearly all going to go further downhill from there. So I think there's a whole kind of, studies have shown that you might get more obese or whatever, there's a whole kind of industry around
Yeah.
the fact that you should be sleeping.
Yes, so it says not sleeping makes you ill.
Yes, I mean, one of the sleep doctors that did speak after the show, he said there's a lot of fear-mongering done now about, there's no fixed number of hours, everybody's different, maybe roughly 7, but when you get older, maybe it's 5 or 6, and when you're a teenager, it's 10, and it depends on your age, it also depends on you personally, and it varies.
And as you say, you can be quite perky after not sleeping.
Yes.
I mean, you
Yes.
can be perky, productive, etc. I do think certain cognitive functions
Yeah.
don't work. I wouldn't want to be operated on first thing in the morning by a really tired surgeon, for example. I mean, it's that kind of hand-eye coordination, brain in gear.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
stuff that I
Yeah.
think suffers with insomnia.
Unfortunately, it happens very often.
Sorry?
Unfortunately, it happens very often.
Yeah. Yes.
This is my doctor friend.
Oh.
I think we've got to stop. Oh, all right, one more. You go on.
I get the impression you kind of put up, you say you haven't set a problem for 2 weeks and you're tired. I mean, did you just put up with this, or did you try to kind of catch up during the day?
I can't sleep during the day, but I have tried sleeping pills and they've failed because I think of insomnia, really I think of it, it's got its own patterns, it's got its own rhythms. When whatever anxiety or whatever it is that I'm going through at the moment passes, I will sleep again, but for now nothing helps really. So, I can put myself to sleep with alcohol, but then I'm awake, like
Yeah.
one like your character, I'm awake at 2 in the morning, wide awake.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're going to end, because actually end on quite a positive note, because come to terms with your insomnia. So thank you so much, Marina. Let's give her a big hand.